All righty. Okay, thank you. So welcome to a special candidate conversation event sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Nebraska. I'm Diane Bystrom, Director of Communication for the League of Women Voters of Nebraska, and I will be your facilitator tonight. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization and does not endorse political candidates or parties. Our purpose is to empower voters and defend democracy by focusing on policy issues. As a result of our discussions, we hope voters will be ready to make informed decision during election time. Tonight is the first of two sessions to hear from candidates for the state legislature running in different Nebraska legislative districts outside of Omaha and Lincoln. Our objective is for voters to hear about the issues and the policies directly from the candidates in a nonpartisan environment. And we'll give a little plug to find out what district you're in. You can go to our vote411.org. It's organized and published by the League of Women Voters of Nebraska and their volunteers. It serves as a one-stop shop for election-related information. It provides specifics about the election process, details about the general and state candidates, and information directly from candidates about their platform for the candidates who respond to the Vote 411 org questionnaire. And it's a really cool thing. Voter basically enters their street address and they get their ballot and they get information about the candidates. They can find out if they're registered. So it's a really cool app that's been around for about 20 years and got, I think, something like 20 million users last year. So we hope that you use that. As our organization is committed to transparency, we want to be clear about our process. So we invited all candidates from contested legislative races outside of Omaha and Lincoln metro areas for these candidate conversations this week. Candidates were provided 2 date options and were contacted several times. We engaged all candidates equally. Some did not respond, some could not attend during a scheduling conflict, and some declined. Due to the number of candidates who did indicate an interest in these candidate conversations, a second session will take place later this week with another set of candidates for the state legislature. I should note that the opponent of one of the candidates here tonight will participate in that event. The candidates here tonight and at the next conversation are those who were willing and able to connect with voters through this league hosted event. Thank you for being here. The format tonight also utilizes methods to ensure its equitability and transparency. As facilitator, I will ask a series of questions that each candidate will have equal time to respond to. The order was determined by your appearance on Facebook tonight, and it turned out to be alphabetical as well. And the first speaker will shift for each question, and Rachel explained that. So we'll just keep on rotating through, and you'll all get a chance to be the first speaker, second speaker, and third speaker. So we're going to jump right now to the introductions and opening statements by the candidates. Each candidate will have 1 minute for their introduction. And by order that we decided on, the first candidate introducing himself will be Mr. Barry DeKay from District 40.
Good evening. My name is Barry DeKay. I live west of Nyborough, Nebraska in Knox County. I'm running for Legislative District 40. Some of the things I've been interested in for the main bullet points will be obviously tax reform. The second one will be working to enhance rural broadband. Along with that, we'll go with economic development and then try to work with the state infrastructure on our highways to try to get a highway going north and south through the state of Nebraska that is 4-lane, so that we have that. We're the only state in the union that does not have that. A couple other things. I am conservative, pro-life person, and I believe in the Second Amendment. And been a 38-year basketball official, 4th generation rancher on our homestead place. It's been in the core of our ranch has been in the family name since 1898. So I've been engaged in agriculture for the last 44 years as an adult. So thank you.
Thanks, Mr. McKay. Our next candidate is Mr. Brian Harden. He's running in District 48.
Hi, I'm a 4th generation farm boy from Western Nebraska. I live in Gearing. We raise sugar beets and beans and corn and hay and a few cows and hogs and chickens. My brother is still in the house where we all grew up. I grew up in the church. My faith is very important to me. I graduated from Gearing High School, then Chadron State, and then Denver Seminary. I worked in insurance and consulting for many years, and I still do that. Lily and I spend a lot of time with family. We have 4 grown kids. They're all omniscient and omnipotent. Just ask them, like we all were in our 20s. We have 2 generations of nieces and nephews who keep us hopping as well. I'm seeking to represent District 48 in the legislature. That's now Kimball, Banner, and Scottsbluff counties. People here are primarily concerned with lower taxes, growth in the ag industry, better paying jobs, and quality available housing. Those are the things I will focus on if elected. I'm also pro-life and I'm pro-Second Amendment, and look forward to chatting with you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Harden. And our third candidate tonight is Miss Sarah Slattery in the 2nd District.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here. So again, yes, my name is Sarah Slattery. I'm running in Legislative District 2, which is the entirety of Cass County, including a little bit of Lancaster County with a little bit of the eastern edge of Lincoln after redistricting. So it's maybe not as vast as some of these Western Nebraska ones, but for in between the 2 metros, I have a pretty big district considering compared to some of these urban ones. But yeah, so I am the working class candidate in my race. I am a professional chef. I am a single mom to a 12-year-old 7th grader. I recently resigned my position as the school nutrition director at the small Catholic school here in Plattsmouth, where my daughter goes, where I went, where my dad went, kind of a legacy thing here. And that's a big part of my platform and reason for running is I would like to expand school nutrition and universal school meals across the state. So.
Thank you, Ms. Slattery. So we're going to start with you, Mr. Harden, with our first question. Ms. Slattery, you'll go next, and then we'll end with Mr. Decay. So the first question is, what is the most pressing issue in K through 12 education, and what will you do to tackle it?
The biggest challenge, I think, here and across most of rural Nebraska in particular is frankly funding it. And that puts a tremendous amount of pressure on property taxes, since property taxes are the main thing that take care of it. As many of you know, Nebraska comes in 49th out of 50 states in terms of how much the state pitches in to help make that happen. And so that just puts undue pressure on those property taxes. And, you know, that's one of the ongoing drip, drip, drip of what we face. Living where we do, rubbing against Wyoming, their property tax rates are literally less than 1/4 what ours are here. That means we have friends and neighbors down the road who talk about it all the time. And so it's front and center, and people here are very frustrated with, despite the fact that we have a lot of changes coming with our taxes that have been improvements, we still come in dead last in every tax category of all of the states we touch, and property taxes, which goes for funding schools, is one of the main issues that has to be tackled.
Thank you, Mr. Harden. Now, Ms. Slattery, again, what is the most pressing issue in K through 12 education, and what would you do to tackle it?
So I could not possibly agree more on the funding. Yes, we need to better fund our schools, and we need to do it less off the backs of working families via property taxes. So that I think is the most important thing, that we fully and equitably fund all of our public schools in the state. And then in addition to that, we need to ensure that our teachers are paid appropriately, that they have appropriate support staff. I'd like to see more counselors and social workers in the schools to support the students. And then again, also finding ways to get these kids fed healthy meals at little to no cost. The federal government was paying for it for a couple years through the pandemic. That has stopped this year. So I would like to try and find ways. It's such a a really good investment of public funds, and it really doesn't cost a lot and it makes a huge impact. So those are the things I think are important.
Thank you, Ms. Slattery. And now to you, Mr. Takei, what is the most pressing issue in K through 12 education, and what would you do to tackle it?
Obviously, this is going to sound a little bit like a broken record, but property taxes is, we pay for 67% of our schools as it comes out of property tax. So we need to be able to shrink our budget, but still be able to adequately fund our schools to give our children of all ages the best education they can going forward. We also need to work with our local school boards and with our state school board to be on point where we are with our curriculum, especially with what's going on with the sex education in schools. I think that is something that our parents need to have a big voice in and need to be a big part of going forward. So I would work very close with the State Board of Education and local school boards to make sure that parents' voices are heard.
Thank you. We'll move on to our second question, and Ms. Slattery, you will be going first. What is the best way to address our current criminal justice system's pressures, including prison overcrowding, sentencing reform, and restoring voter rights to former felons?
Well, I think that, yeah, we don't just have an overcrowding problem, we have an overcrowding epidemic in this state. And the answer to that problem is not building a new prison. The answer to the problem is figuring out how it happened in the first place. We need to take another look and rethink mandatory minimum sentencing in regards to no two cases are the same, and so no two people deserve the same punishment. I think that we need to leave that up to the discretion of the judges who have made it their vocation to do this, and they know a lot more about the criminal justice system than the legislature does. And then I think looking into how we penalize nonviolent crimes and maybe not making those prison worthy, and that would definitely help. And I know that I've talked to a lot of public employees that work in corrections, and yeah, first of all, they have a staffing shortage, and they're burned out, and they need to be able to do their jobs better too. So.
All right, thank you. Now to you, Mr. Takei. Again, what is the best way to address our current criminal justice system pressures, including overcrowding, sentencing reform, and restoring voting rights to former felons?
First of all, we need to work hand in hand with our law enforcement to give them the best tools possible to help alleviate crimes going forward. Second part of that is I am not going to be opposed to possibly building a new prison for the simple fact that we can ease overcrowding in that aspect, but we can also implement ways to put programs in place to reform these prisoners so that when they do serve their time in incarceration, that they can get out and be a productive member of society and not have to fall back on the ways that got them in the position they were in to begin with. So we need to work with our law enforcement. We need to make sure our sentences are carried out to the point that they need to be carried out to without overtaxing that prisoner, but we also need to make sure that they know that they have committed a crime against society. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Harden, again, we're talking about the best way to address our current criminal justice system pressures, prison overcrowding, sentencing reform, and restoring voting rights to felons.
One of the main issues I would like to focus on is mental health. In our part of the world, we see an awful lot of young men predominantly who get in trouble out in Scottsbluff County, Kimball County, Banner County, and there are not a lot of options for law enforcement at that point. Many times what ends up happening is we send them off to Kaplan here locally, and they can perhaps stay there for 3 to 5 days, but they don't really get a lot of ongoing help in terms of counseling and so on and so forth. What happens if they get in trouble is they land in a jail cell in the county jail with someone who really educates them And unfortunately, that's not the right kind of influence. What ends up then happening next is they become more adept at being a criminal. And I think we need to focus more on keeping them out. But I too am open to needing to rebuilding that prison. It's old. It's been built onto many times. And I think we may need to address that issue as much as we've avoided it in the past. We need to address it.
Great, thank you. Mr. Decay, we're starting with you this round. As you know, I'm sure several bills were brought last legislative session about elections, voting access, and things of that nature. What do you think is the primary issue that needs to be focused on in our discussions about elections and voters?
The first thing that I think we need to address is voter ID. I think if we have people are who they say they are, that would alleviate some problems. So first of all, we need to get the proper amount of ballots to the people that are registered to vote, and no more, no less. But with voter ID, I think that would alleviate some of the problem going forward in that. And that would be the first step I would want to address. And I know that's an initiative going on the ballot this fall. So yes.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Harden, and again, what do you think is the primary issue that needs to be focused on in our discussions about elections and voters?
Voter ID is very important. We also need to get more people involved in the process. There are a number of districts where, frankly, they just don't have enough volunteers to get that job done adequately. And so, but yeah, voter ID is a huge one. That will take care of a lot of issues. The other issue is just that, frankly, of early voting and so on and so forth. I think where there are opportunities to cheat come from working outside. Mail-in ballots need to go the way of the dodo. Very few people out there cannot make it at some point to one of the most important days that happens every 2 years or every 4 years. And so in a nutshell, we need to prioritize it. And so let's remove the opportunities to cheat by getting rid of mail-in ballots.
Thank you. Ms. Slattery, again, in your perspective, what do you think is the primary issue that needs to be focused on in our discussions about elections and voters?
So I think it needs to be emphasized that we have never had an issue with fraudulent voting in the state of Nebraska. Our elections have always been fair, safe, and secure. I also think it needs to be known that requiring an ID to vote, an ID that people have to purchase, is considered a poll tax. They don't accept a passport or a military ID or a school ID or anything like that. It has to be a state issued ID, and those cost money, and you can't charge money to have people vote. So that's a non-starter for me. It's also absolutely not necessary. And I would like to say in the primary, there were tens, if not hundreds of thousands of mail-in ballots from both parties requested and sent back in. So this isn't a single party. It's not a partisan issue. People maybe don't want to leave their home to vote, and you have to prove who you are to get a driver's license by bringing a piece of mail with your mailing address, right? So if this gets mailed to your house, the same place that you use the thing to get the license, it's all like, you are who you say you are. It's redundant.
Okay, so this question first goes to Mr. Harden. What do you think is the most productive way to retain and recruit working people to Nebraska?
We need to smooth off the rough edges of our licensing protocols. Reciprocity needs to be a main emphasis moving forward. Frankly, we've made it difficult for people from the trades. If you're an electrician, if you're in carpentry, if you are a plumber, we've made it difficult. It's more difficult to get into Nebraska with a background in that than it is to get nuclear codes. It's ridiculous. Many medical professionals have found it difficult to come to our state. Teachers have found it difficult to come to our state, despite the fact that all of these different sectors will say that they have made it easier or completely free of challenge. when people actually try and do it, they're still running into snags. We need to make it easier to come to Nebraska and ply your trade.
You, Mr. Harden, and now we'll go to you, Ms. Slattery. And again, what do you think is the most productive way to retain and recruit working people to Nebraska?
Well, I think a huge part of it would be updating our infrastructure and bringing high-speed internet across the state. That will keep young folks, moving back out to maybe where they were from, and keeping these communities lively and viable. I know I read within the last couple months, 3 senior living facilities have closed just in Lexington, Nebraska, which is, that has to be almost all of them, right? And so when that happens, that takes away this healthcare accessibility for a lot of people. And so if we don't bring the rest of the state up to speed that way, then we're just going to continue to have an ever aging population out in these rural parts without anyone there to care for them. And then also just becoming a more welcoming state where people of marginalized communities can feel like they're going to be safe living here and welcomed. I think that that's super important too.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Slattery. Now we'll go to Mr. Decay. And again, the question is, what do you think is the most productive way to retain and recruit working people to Nebraska?
3 quick points on that. Number one, there are 57,000 jobs available in the state of Nebraska, all the way from tradesmen to professionals. We need to be able to go outside our state. If those engineers, doctors, and people like that, lawyers, if we could fill those positions in the state, we need to do that. But if we have to go outside the state to get those people to recruit to come to Nebraska to see what the good life is about, I think that would be a giant step. I think another thing we could also do is help set up intern programs with our community colleges to go ahead and work with your carpenters, your plumbers, electricians, truck drivers, try to entice people. And as one of the other candidates said, I've been a proponent for rural broadband to get young families back in the state of Nebraska, to be back in their home rural setting, to be vibrant members of their community, helping escalate Main Street and help keep our rural schools viable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Decay. Now, Ms. Slattery, you have the first shot at this question. Several state senators have stated that they plan to bring legislation to further loosen gun restrictions in Nebraska. What do you think is the appropriate level of regulation?
Well, so I am absolutely a proponent for responsible gun ownership. That being said, I think that loosening restrictions and allowing people to openly and freely carry guns without any kind of licensing or training or anything like that doesn't seem like a great idea. We don't let people do that with cars, right? You have to pass a test. You have to, keep that up to date. You have, take driver's ed. You need insurance, and I think that, have a responsible gun ownership community. I think that those are the least we can do.
Okay, Mr. Decay, you're next. And again, that question at the end is, what do you think is the appropriate level regulation of guns?
I don't think we should be able to carry weapons around open face as, looking like a vigilante, but I do support LB 773 that we have the opportunity to carry those firearms in our families. And I agree with part of the LB 773 where we should be able to protect our family. If there's a break-in in our home, we shouldn't have to retreat. Not that I think anybody needs to be wounded in an altercation, but we should be able to protect ourselves, our family, and our homes. So that's part of LB 773 that I do support 100%. But we do need to be able to let our citizens have guns to be able to protect themselves too.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Harden, again, that question is, what do you think is the appropriate level of regulation for guns?
I believe, and most of the people in our district very much believe in constitutional carry. Additionally, we think that our right or a duty to retreat is the unfortunate and wrong response to what needs to happen, especially in a place where sheriff department can be hours away, particularly in the winter and the snowstorms and so on and so forth. We need to have not only stand your ground laws, but castle doctrine laws as well.
Thank you. And the next question is, and the first person to answer this is Mr. Takei. So will you work to preserve the nonpartisan nature of our unicameral? And if so, how?
Yes, I will work. I've always have said that the unicameral is very unique in its structure. I think as state senators, we got to work across the aisles with each other to get the best laws going forward. You take a common sense approach to the laws that's going to be beneficial for urban Nebraska and rural Nebraska, and hopefully be able to see it the same way from both sides of the aisle and from within each party structure, to be able to take a common sense approach, like I said, to do what's best for the state of Nebraska, regardless of who introduces a bill.
Okay. Thank you. Now, Mr. Harden, same question. Will you work to preserve the nonpartisan nature of the Nebraska unicameral? And if so, how?
Yes, I'm a politically conservative guy who grew up in a rural area, and I'm part of an evangelical church. I have a master's degree from a conservative Christian theological seminary. Typically, I find myself working each day with a majority of people who do not share my political views, my worldview, my patriotism. By the way, I predominantly work in international business consulting, and yet we solve difficult business challenges daily. We focus on common ground. Sometimes there's very little. Sometimes we hammer out solutions that surprise us all. So figuring out real world solutions is not something I can put off. It's not theoretical for me. It's something I have to participate in daily, and I'll bring that to the legislature.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Slattery, same question. Will you work to preserve the nonpartisan nature of the Nebraska unicameral? And if so, how?
Absolutely. I think that that is the most special part. I mean, the unicameral in and of itself is really special. And the fact that it is nonpartisan and historically has managed to get a lot of things done. I think in this current climate of like really hyper partisanship, we're losing sight of some of that. And so, yeah, so I think the most important thing that we can do to keep the legislature nonpartisan is to maintain that secret ballot voting on legislative leadership roles, because that ensures that the people are going to vote for the best qualified person for the job, and not because they're on the same team. And really, you know, we should all be on the same team. We're all Nebraskans, and we should be wanting the best person in each position. But again, this hyper partisanship means if that secret ballot gets taken away, then people are going to vote according to their party so that they don't get retaliation. And I think that's so unproductive.
Okay, Mr. Harden, you have the first shot at this next question. Abortion and reproductive rights will surely be a topic in the next session. Do you favor legislation? And if so, what would you support in a bill?
I do favor legislation, and I agree with you. Yes, it will. And I'm pro-life, and I would like to make sure that the abortion industry goes away in Nebraska.
We'll go next to you, Ms. Slattery, again. Do you favor legislation on abortion and reproductive rights? And if so, what would you support in a bill?
I don't. We already have laws on the books, so I think that that's a done deal. I think there are other things that we could turn our attention to that are pro-life as well, like, you know, feeding kids lunch. and making sure they can go to school without being, shot. I think that, it's said and done, and the government doesn't really belong in an examination room with a doctor and a patient. No matter what we're talking about, it's a personal decision, it's a personal choice, and it's not for the government to decide. We are it's a separation of church and state, and we need to keep it that way.
Thank you, Ms. Slattery. And we will now go to Mr. Decay. And again, that question is, do you favor legislation on abortion rights, reproductive rights, abortion and reproductive rights? And if so, what would you support in the bill?
I do support it. I am pro-life. I think the unborn babies need to be protected. It's not just a woman at that point protecting herself. It's there's two beings involved in that, and we need to be able to take care of both the mother and the child, and I would support that 100%.
Slattery, this question is for you. Starting first, the president recently signed into law the biggest climate change investment in American history, which includes funds to help rural communities develop solutions resilient to the impacts of climate change. On a state level, how should Nebraska address climate change?
Well, I think that we could invest a lot more in sustainable energy and restorative agricultural processes that can, help keep our land viable for generations to come. We need to make sure that we are protecting our water. Right now, in my district, there's a little village called Alvo, and they have had contaminated water for a really long time. And to make it so that they can consume it, they put so much chlorine in it that it burns the kids when they give them baths. So we need to make sure that, I think that water is one of our, if not the most important resource. So we need to make sure that any practices that we're doing and any new infrastructure and anything that we're doing is going to only improve the quality of our water and not make it worse, because we're already on an uphill battle with that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Decay, we're going next to you. On a state level, how should Nebraska address climate change?
I think right now, as a former member of Nebraska Public Power Board, I think we're doing a very good job addressing climate change. We need to work to have sustainable, reliable electricity going forward, and that would alleviate a lot of the problem. And we need to work with our ranchers, with our farmers, to make sure that our nitrate levels in water are adequate. We need to be able to work with the people to get those levels down to the parts per million that they need to be. But as with going forward with, like I said, with Nebraska Public Power, we've worked very hard to put together a footprint of how we could go forward and be reliable and be energy efficient and cost effective going forward. And we need to stay in line with that footprint and let our experts in those fields help us do the best job we can going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Decay. Now we have, finally, we will hear from Mr. Harden. And again, on a state level, how should Nebraska address climate change?
We should take a look at Kemmerer, Wyoming, and see how they're addressing climate change. In fact, it's fascinating that two of the darlings of the left, in Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, we find two people who are taking the lead in funding a sodium-cooled nuclear reactor that will come online in about 3 more years. And in a nutshell, we need to take a serious look at nuclear. If we're serious about saying, let's reduce a carbon footprint, then let's actually do that. And at the same time, let's stop notions about let's have everyone drive an electric vehicle, pretending that somehow that electric vehicle is charged by I don't know, magic beans or something. They get charged by other traditional means of electricity. And so we need to be realistic about what all of that means for our future.
Thank you. And we are now on our last and final question. And among our favorite questions, because it's something that I think we have a little bit of fun with. We are back to where we started with Mr. Decay going first. What is the favorite thing about your district?
The favorite thing about my district is, number one, I've lived here for my total 63 years. And when you live here every day, you don't appreciate the beauty of Northeast Nebraska, the rolling hills. And that is one thing that I would work very hard on. If we're working through either the Star Wars project with Nebraska State Park and Lewis and Clark, I would like to be able to enhance that, to have people come visit our neck of the woods, but keep it a rustic environment. We don't need to commercialize Northeast Nebraska. It's got enough beauty in itself. And I just appreciate, as I drive around the district, the hard work and the appreciation that people in our district are, and proud of where they are and what they stand for.
Thank you. And indeed, a very beautiful area of the state, which I'm delighted in visiting myself. So, and also I visited your area as well, Mr. Harden, in fact, just recently, and Scottsbluff and Gering area. Anyway, so Mr. Harden, what is the favorite thing about your district?
You don't want to fall off of our hills, you'll get hurt here. And this is the only place in Nebraska where you can really say that. So it's not flat here. Truly, we have the coolest people out there in Nebraska. Sorry, all of the rest of you, but we really do have amazing people here in Western Nebraska. And they are very innovative. They work incredibly hard, and there's just a work ethic that is amazing out here. Of all of the states, of all of the counties in the state, we've enjoyed the highest labor participation rate, while at the same time having the lowest unemployment rate. That's just the ethic of our people. By the way, we also have the best food. We do Mexican food here, and we're really, really good at it.
Thank you. So Miss Slattery, what is the favorite thing, your favorite thing about your district?
Well, I love how much there is to do. So not only is my district adjacent to both Lincoln and Omaha, so it doesn't take long to get to those cities to do the city things, but LD2 is home to some of the really cool, amazing things that Nebraska has to offer. So we have 4 state parks in my district. Platte River State Park, the Mahoney State Park, which is kind of the gem of the Games and Park Service, Louisville State Recreation Area, and Schramm Park State Recreation Area, which is the fish hatchery that everybody goes on a field trip to. And in addition to that, we've got the Simmons Wildlife Safari, we've got the Strategic Air and Space Museum, and then we've got loads of glamping. So my family, I opened a vineyard and tasting room with my folks about 15 years ago. I'm the chef there. We were the original glamping destination in the state, and now there are a lot of them in District 2, and that's really, really cool. It's a great, you know, kind of staycation getaway that people can travel to and enjoy a lot of things in a condensed area. All
right, thank you, everybody. It sounds like you all have wonderful districts. Lots of fun, lots of things to see and do. Want to thank you all again for joining us tonight. If you want to learn more about the candidates and the issues that will be on your ballot, again, please visit vote411.org for a personalized resource tool. Special thank you to the candidates participating in tonight's conversation. For the League of Women Voters, I'm Diane Bystrom. As always, we urge you to be informed and to be a voter on November 8th. Thank you.